The crystal cities of Kepler 442b glowed softly in the morning light of their twin suns. Admiral Zithara stood on the highest tower of the capital city, her translucent blue form catching the sunlight and breaking it into rainbow patterns. She watched the peaceful world below, where millions of her people went about their daily lives. The Zorathians had built their civilization on beauty and knowledge. Their cities grew like living crystals from the ground, each building shaped by thought and harmony. Gardens of singing plants filled the spaces between towers. Rivers of pure water flowed through channels carved with perfect precision. This was a world without war, without weapons, without fear. Zethara's people had spent 3,000 years learning the secrets of the universe. They could bend light itself to their will. They could grow ships from crystal seeds that would sail between the stars. They could speak mind to mind across vast distances, but they had never learned to fight. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Isara turned to see Commander Velthan approaching. His crystal form was a deep green, and worry clouded his features. "We are receiving strange signals from the edge of our system." Zethara followed him to the communication center. The room hummed with soft energy as dozens of Zorathians worked at stations made of living crystal. The walls showed images of space around their world, peaceful and empty as it had always been. "Show me," Zethara said. Velthan touched a crystal panel, and the main display changed. Dark shapes moved at the very edge of their solar system, just barely visible. They were huge, larger than any ship the Zorathians had ever seen. And they were moving fast, heading straight for Kepler 442b. "How many?" Zethara asked. "We count at least 50 large vessels, Admiral. Perhaps twice that number of smaller ones." They appeared from nowhere, as if they came from the dark space between systems. Zethara felt a chill run through her crystal body. In all their years of space travel, the Zorathians had met many alien races. Some were friendly, some were distant, but none had ever shown aggression. The galaxy was a place of peace and learning. "Try to contact them," she ordered. "Use all frequencies. Perhaps they are travelers in need of help." For the next hour, the Zorathians sent messages in every language they knew. They offered welcome, food, fuel, anything the strangers might need. But the dark ships did not answer. They just kept coming, moving faster than anything should be. Able to move. Then the screaming started. It began as a whisper in the minds of the most sensitive Zorathians. A sound like metal tearing, like worlds dying, like the cry of something that should never have been born. The psychic scream grew louder as the dark ships came closer. Zethara watched in horror as her communications officers began to shake. Some fell to the floor, their crystal bodies flickering with pain. The sound was inside their heads, clawing at their thoughts like a living thing. "Get everyone away from the psychic arrays," she ordered. "Block all mental connections to the outer system." But it was too late. The scream was already there in all their minds, and with it came images. Terrible images of what the dark ships truly were. They were not ships at all. They were creatures. Living things the size of cities, with hulls of black metal grown over flesh that pulsed with alien life. Weapons sprouted from their bodies like tumors. Eyes the size of buildings stared out from their sides, filled with hunger that could never be satisfied. The Vraxx had found them. Zethara had heard stories of the Vraxx from traders who came from distant systems. They were whispered tales, the kind that spacers told to frighten children. A race of creatures that consumed everything in their path. They would devour entire worlds, adding the knowledge and flesh of their victims to their own bodies. Wherever they went, only silence followed. But the story said they stayed in the dark regions of space, far from civilized worlds. No one believed they were real. Now Zethara knew the stories were true. and the Vraxx were coming for her people. Sound? The evacuation alarm, she ordered. Get every ship we have into space. We need to get our people away from the planet. Velthan's hands moved over the crystal controls. Throughout the city and across the entire planet, warning sounds began to ring. But they were not the harsh alarms that other races might use. The Zorathians had no experience with danger. Their warnings were gentle chimes, beautiful even in their urgency. It took precious time to explain to the population what was happening. The Zorathians had no word for invasion in their language. They had to use phrases like uninvited visitors with harmful intent and a need to relocate quickly for safety. Many did not understand. Some thought it was a drill or a mistake. First Zorathian defense ships rose from the planet's surface as the Vraxx fleet entered the outer system. They were beautiful vessels, grown from pure crystal and powered by captured starlight. Each one was a work of art, designed for exploration and peaceful contact with other races. Against the Vraxx, they were helpless. The leading Vraxx bioship opened fire when the defense fleet was still millions of kilometers away. The weapon was unlike anything in Zorathian experience. It was not a beam of energy or a physical projectile. It was something that reached out through space itself and touched the target directly. The first Zorathian ship simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, broadcasting peaceful greetings and requests for dialogue. The next moment, there was only empty space and scattered particles. The second ship died as quickly as the first. Then the third. Zithara watched from her command. Sent her as half her defense fleet was destroyed in the first minute of contact. The surviving ships turned and fled toward the planet, their crystal hulls flickering with fear-induced light. Our shields, Velthan said, his voice shaking. Rays. Planetary shields. The great energy barrier that protected Kepler 442b from cosmic radiation and space. Debris began to form in the upper atmosphere. It was beautiful, like a soap bubble made of pure light. It had kept their world safe for 1,000 years. The Vraxx. Weapons cut through it like it was made of air. The first bombardment struck the northern continent. Cities that had stood for millennia vanished in seconds. Crystal towers that had taken centuries to grow were turned to dust. Millions of Zorathians died before they even knew they were in danger. Zethara fell to her knees as the psychic death scream of her people hit her mind. She could feel each life ending, each consciousness snuffed out by the hungry darkness of the Vraxx. Her beautiful, peaceful world was being murdered, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Admiral Velthan sighed, helping her to her feet. We have to evacuate the capital. The ships that can still fly are gathering at the spaceport. Zithara looked at the display one more time. The Vraxx fleet was spreading out, surrounding the planet. Some of the bioships were launching smaller vessels, landing craft filled with creatures that would hunt down any survivors. Send out a distress call, she said. All frequencies, all languages. Tell everyone in the galaxy what is happening here. Who will answer? Velthan asked. Who would help us? Zethara did not know. The Zorathians had few real allies. They had always believed their peaceful nature would protect them. Now that belief was proven wrong, and their world was dying, but she had to try. Somewhere in the galaxy, someone might hear their call. Someone might care that an entire race was being destroyed. As the Crystal City began to collapse around them, Zithara and her people ran for their lives, hoping that help would come before it was too late. Captain Sarah Chun stood on the bridge of the U-East Defiant, watching the stars through the main view screen. The ship was humanity's newest Dreadnought, a massive vessel built for one purpose: war. Its hull was thick armor, plating over a framework of reinforced steel. Gun turrets studded its surface like the spines of some mechanical beast. Inside, 15,000 crew members worked at stations designed for battle. The Defiant was conducting training exercises near the edge of human space. Chun watched her crew run through combat drills, testing every system on the ship. These were veterans, men and women, who had fought in a dozen conflicts across human space. They knew their business. "Captain," called Lieutenant Torres from the communication station. "We're picking up a distress signal. Long range from outside human territory." Chun turned toward him. "What kind of signal?" "Multiple frequencies, multiple languages. It's hard to understand, ma'am. The translation computers are having trouble with it. But it sounds like someone's under attack." Chun walked over to the communication station. The Defiant's computers were among the best in human space, loaded with every known alien language. If they were having trouble translating, the signal was from a race humanity had never met before. "Play it," she said. The bridge speakers crackled with static, then a voice came through. It was high and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. But underneath the beauty, Chun could hear terror. Double quotes. Anyone who receives this message. Our world is under attack. Creatures from the dark. Please. Help us. We are dying. The message repeated in several languages Chun recognized, and in others she did not. Each version carried the same desperate plea for help. "Where's it coming from?" Chun asked. Torres checked his instruments. "The Kepler 442 system, Captain. That's Zorathian space." Chun knew about the Zorathians. They were a peaceful race of crystal beings who lived about 50 light years from Earth. Human diplomats had tried to establish relations with them several times, but the Zorathians had always politely refused. They considered humans too violent, too focused on military matters. They wanted nothing to do with Earth's warrior culture. "Sir," said Commander Jackson, Chun's first officer, "the Zorathians have never asked for help before. If they're sending out distress calls, it means they're in real trouble," Chun finished. She studied the star charts on her display. The Kepler 442 system was far outside human space, in a region that Earth had no formal claim to. No treaties required her to help. No orders from Earth Command told her to respond, but someone was dying out there. Chun had joined the Earth Navy 20 years ago, after the Mars Rebellion nearly tore human space apart. She had fought pirates in the asteroid belt, rebels on Titan, and alien raiders along the frontier. She had seen what happened when good people did nothing while innocents suffered. "Helm," she said. "Set course for the Kepler 442 system. Maximum speed." "Captain," Jackson said quietly, "that's 3 jumps through uncharted space. If something goes wrong with the FTL drive, then we fix it and keep going," Chun replied. "Torres, send a message to Fleet Command. Tell them we're responding to a distress call. We'll report in when we can." "Sir, shouldn't we wait for orders?" Chun looked at him. "Lieutenant, there are 15,000 people on this ship. Every one of them swore an oath to protect the innocent and defend the weak. The Zorathians might not like us, but they're innocent. And right now, they need defending." The Defiant turned away from its patrol route and jumped to hyperspace. The ship shuddered as it entered the space between dimensions, where physics worked differently and distances became meaningless. In hyperspace, the Defiant could cross 50 light years in a matter of hours, but the route to Zorathian space was dangerous. There were no navigation beacons in the empty regions between human and Zorathian territory. No mapped safe passages. The ship would have to jump blind, trusting its computers to find a path through the twisted geography of hyperspace. Chun used the travel time to prepare her crew. She called her senior officers to the briefing room, a utilitarian chamber lined with displays and tactical stations. No artwork decorated the walls. No comfortable furniture made the space welcoming. This was a room built for making hard decisions. "What do we know about the attackers?" she asked. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez, the ship's intelligence officer, pulled up data on the main screen. The distress signal mentioned creatures from the dark. That could mean raiders from outside the galaxy, or something from the unexplored regions of space. "What about the Zorathians' defenses?" asked Major Hayes, commander of the ship's marine contingent. "Minimal," Rodriguez replied. "They're a peaceful race. Their ships are designed for exploration and scientific research, not combat. They have some energy shields and basic defensive weapons, but nothing that could stop a serious attack." Chun studied the tactical display. "How many people live in their system?" "About 800 million on the main planet, Captain, plus research stations and orbital facilities. If their defenses have failed, double quotes Chun did not need him to finish. 800 million lives hung in the balance, and the Defiant was the only ship close enough to help. "Major Hayes," she said, "I want your Marines ready for anything. If we have to board enemy ships or evacuate civilians, I need your people prepared." "Yes, sir." "What kind of enemy should we expect?" "Unknown. But if they're attacking a peaceful race like the Zorathians, they're probably not interested in negotiation." The first hyperspace jump went smoothly. The Defiant dropped back into normal space in an empty system, alone among distant stars. The navigation computers quickly calculated the next jump, deeper into uncharted territory. The second jump was harder. Hyperspace currents in this region were unstable, twisted by the gravity of a nearby black hole. The ship's hull groaned under the stress, and several minor systems failed. But the Defiant held together, built tough enough to survive the journey. During the third jump, they started picking up more signals from Zorathian space. The distress calls were getting weaker, more desperate. Chun could hear the fear in the alien voices, even through the translation difficulties. "Captain," Tories called out as they prepared for the final jump. "I'm getting fragments of communication from the attack zone. The translation is rough, but I think the attackers are called the Vraxx." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. She had heard whispers about the Vraxx from deep space traders and scouts. They were stories told in bars on frontier worlds, tales of biomechanical horrors that consumed entire civilizations. Most people thought they were just legends. "Are you sure?" she asked. "No, sir. The signal is breaking up badly." "But that's what it sounds like." If the stories were true, the Zorathians were facing something far worse than raiders or territorial disputes. The Vraxx were supposed to be living nightmares, creatures that turned entire worlds into feeding grounds. "All hands, prepare for combat," Chun announced over the ship's intercom. "We are approaching a hostile situation. Battle stations." Throughout the Defiant, 15,000 crew members moved to their posts. Gun crews loaded the massive rail cannons. Fighter pilots ran to their craft. Marines checked their weapons and armor. The ship transformed from a vessel of exploration into an instrument of war. The final jump brought them to the edge of the Kepler 442 system. As soon as they dropped out of hyperspace, the ship's sensors began screaming warnings. System was full of wreckage. Pieces of crystal ships drifted in the void, their beautiful forms shattered in dark. Energy signatures showed massive explosions on the planet's surface. And moving among the debris were shapes that made Chun's blood run cold. The Vraxx were real, and they were exactly as terrible as the stories claimed. "My God," whispered Commander Jackson. Chun stared at the display, taking in the scale of the destruction. An entire civilization was being murdered, and they had arrived just in time to watch it happen. But the Defiant was not a ship built for watching. It was built for fighting. "All weapons, target the nearest enemy vessel," Chun ordered. Let's see if these things bleed. The used Defiant hung at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, like a metal predator studying its prey. Captain Chun stood on the bridge, watching the tactical display with growing horror. What she saw there challenged everything she thought she knew about warfare and life itself. The Vraxx ships were not ships at all. They were living creatures, each one the size of a human city. Their hulls were black as the space between stars, but Chun could see they pulsed with organic rhythm. Weapons grew from their sides like metal tumors. Eyes larger than football stadiums stared out from their surfaces, burning with an intelligence that was utterly alien. Jesus Christ, muttered Lieutenant Torres. Those things are alive. Chun had seen many horrors in her years of service. She had fought pirates who tortured their prisoners for fun. She had battled alien raiders who collected human skulls as trophies, but nothing had prepared her for this. The Vraxx were not just alien. They were wrong, as if they came from a universe where different laws of nature applied. Sensors, she called. Give me numbers. Ensign Kim worked frantically at her station. I count 47 large bioships, Captain. Each one is between 5 and 15 kilometers long. There are also smaller craft, maybe 100 of them. They're feeding. Chun looked closer at the display. Some of the Vraxx ships had extended long tentacles down to the planet's surface. The tentacles were pulling up chunks of matter, absorbing everything they touched. Cities, forests, even the crystal formations that made Zorathian architecture so beautiful. All of it was being consumed. They're eating the planet, Commander Jackson said, his voice hollow. Not just the planet, Kim replied. Look at this. She highlighted one of the smaller Vraxx vessels. It had captured a damaged Zorathian ship and was slowly dissolving it with acid secretions. As Chun watched, the bioship's hull began to change, taking on some of the crystal patterns from its victim. They adapt, Chun realized. They're not just destroying the Zorathians. They're learning from them, adding their technology to their own bodies. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Kumar, spoke up from his station. Captain, I'm reading massive energy signatures from the planet. The Vraxx are doing something to the core. Chun felt sick. They're going to consume the entire world. Every living thing, every piece of technology, every bit of knowledge the Zorathians ever had. On the main screen, she could see the few surviving Zorathian ships fleeing toward the outer system. They were beautiful vessels, their crystal hulls catching starlight and turning it into rainbow patterns. But they were also helpless. Their weapons could barely scratch the Vraxx bioships, and their shields offered no protection against the creature's adaptive weaponry. Communication from the Zorathian flagship, Torres reported. Put it through. The voice that came over the speakers was the same musical tone Chun had heard in the distress call, but now it was broken with despair. Unknown vessel, this is Admiral Zathara of the Zorathian Defense Fleet. You must leave this system immediately. The Vraxx will consume you as they have consumed us. Chun activated the reply channel. Admiral, this is Captain Sarah Chun of the Earthship Defiant. We received your distress call. We're here to help. There was a long pause. When Zathara spoke again, her voice held disbelief. You are human? That's right. But humans are. Another pause. Your people refused our offers of cultural exchange. You said we were too violent for your society. Chun smiled grimly. Admiral, you have that backwards. You refused our offers because you thought we were too violent. And right now, that might be exactly what you need. Before Zathara could reply, the nearest Vraxx bioship turned toward the Defiant. The creature was massive, easily twice the size of Chun's Dreadnought. Weapon ports opened along its hull like hungry mouths. Energy began to build in its organic. Cannons. All hands, brace for impact, Chun ordered. Shields to maximum. Return fire. The Vraxx creature attacked with a weapon unlike anything in human experience. It was not a beam or a projectile, but something that reached through space, itself to touch its target. The energy struck the Defiant's shields and began to adapt, learning the frequency and composition of human defensive technology. But the Defiant's shields were not like Zorathian energy barriers. They were brute force constructions, layered fields, of raw power designed to stop anything the universe could throw at them. The Vraxx weapon pushed against them, adapted to them, but could not break through. Shields holding at 80%, Kumar reported. Whatever that thing fired, it's trying to learn our technology. Then let's not give it time to learn, Chun replied. All batteries, open fire. The Defiant's main guns were rail cannons, massive magnetic accelerators that fired solid projectiles at significant fractions of light speed. They were simple weapons, based on principles that any species could understand. But they were also devastatingly effective. The first salvo struck the Vraxx bioship along its flank, the creature's living armor, designed to adapt to energy weapons. And exotic radiation had no defense against simple kinetic force. Chunks of organic metal were torn away, revealing pulsing interior organs. The bioship screamed. The sound came not through space, but through some psychic channel that bypassed the normal laws of physics. Every person on the Defiant felt it, a cry of pain and rage that seemed to claw at their minds. Several crew members staggered, clutching their heads. What the hell was that? Jackson gasped. Psychic attack, Chun replied, fighting off the mental intrusion through sheer force of will. The Vraxx communicate through some kind of hive mind. When we hurt one, they all feel it. The wounded bioship tried to retreat, but the Defiant's guns followed it. More railgun rounds tore into its hull, each impact sending fresh waves of psychic agony through the Vraxx fleet. The creature's adaptive systems were useless against the simple physics of metal traveling at tremendous speed. Captain Torres called out, "The other Vraxx ships are turning toward us." All of them. Chun looked at the tactical display. Every bioship in the system was abandoning its feeding to focus on the human vessel. She had gotten their attention, all right. Unfortunately, she was now the target of 46 creatures that each outweighed her ship by a factor of 10. "Admiral Zithara," she called over the communication channel. "This would be a good time for your ships to get clear. We're about to get very busy." "Captain Chun," Azarthian replied, "your vessel cannot possibly survive against so many Vraxx. Why are you doing this?" Chun watched the enemy bioships closing in, their organic weapons charging for another attack. Her ship was outnumbered, outgunned, and facing an enemy that could adapt to any tactic she used. By all reasonable calculations, the Defiant was about to be destroyed. "Because it's the right thing to do," she said simply. The Vraxx fleet opened fire as one, dozens of adaptive weapons reaching out to tear the human ship apart. But Chun was not planning to fight a defensive battle. The Defiant was built for aggression. And aggression was exactly what the situation called for. "All ahead full," she ordered. "Take us into the middle of them." "Captain?" Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "The Vraxx adapt to whatever we throw at them," Chun explained as the ship accelerated toward the enemy fleet. "So we're going to throw everything at them at once. If they want to learn how humans fight, let's give them a complete education." The Defiant plunged into the heart of the Vraxx formation, like a spear thrust into the body of some great beast. Its guns fired continuously, switching between rail rounds, plasma bolts, and nuclear missiles in random sequence. Each time the Ziyas. Bioships began to adapt to one weapon type. The humans switched to another, but the real surprise was still to come. As the Defiant reached the center of the enemy formation, Chun gave the order that would either save them or destroy them all. "Launch all fighters. commenced boarding operations. Human fighter craft swarmed out of the Dreadnought's bays, tiny compared to the massive bioships, but fast and deadly. Behind them came assault shuttles, filled with Marines in powered armor, heading directly for the Vraxx vessels that no species in the galaxy had ever tried to board a Vraxx bioship. The creatures were living nightmares, filled with acid and organic. Weapons. To enter one was considered certain death. But humans had a saying, if you're going through hell, keep going. The Marines were about to test that philosophy against the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever known. The first boarding shuttle hit the side of a Vraxx bioship like a bullet striking flesh. Marine Sergeant Rita Vasquez felt the impact through her powered armor as the shuttle's breaching charges blew a hole in the creature's living hull. Acid sprayed from the wound, but her armor's coating turned it aside. Go, go, go. She shouted into her comm unit. 12 Marines poured out of the shuttle into the nightmare interior of the Vraxx vessel. The walls were not metal or plastic, but something that pulsed like a heart. Organic cables hung from the ceiling, carrying fluids that glowed with sickly light. The air was thick with chemicals that would have killed an unprotected human in seconds, but the Marines were not unprotected. Their armor was the best human technology could build, designed to keep them alive in the most hostile environments imaginable. Vacuum, radiation, acid, fire. Nothing the universe could throw it. M would stop a human Marine in full gear. Ugly place, muttered Corporal Zhang, sweeping the area with his plasma rifle. Smells like a slaughterhouse. Stay focused, Vasquez replied. She checked her tactical display, looking for the best route to the bioship's vital organs. Intel says these things have multiple brain clusters. We need to find them and shut them down. The Marines moved deeper into the creature, following passages that curved and twisted like arteries. The walls tried to close around them, but plasma fire and shaped charges kept the path open. Behind them, acid began to seal the wounds they had made. They were not the only boarding party. All across the Vraxx fleet, human Marines were forcing their way into bioships that had never been invaded before. It was a tactic that no other species would have attempted, because no other species was crazy enough to think it might work. On the bridge of the Defiant, Captain Chun watched the battle unfold on multiple screens. Her ship was at the center of a swirling combat that covered millions of cubic kilometers of space. Vraxx bioships moved like living mountains, their weapons reaching out to crush the tiny human vessel. But the Defiant refused to die. Shields down to 40%, Kumar reported. Hull breaches on decks 12 and 15. Damage control teams responding, Jackson added. We've lost 2 main gun turrets, but the rail cannons are still firing. Chun nodded, her attention focused. On the tactical display, the Vraxx were adapting to human weapons, but slowly. Each time they figured out how to counter one attack, the humans switched to something else. Railguns gave way to plasma cannons, which gave way to nuclear missiles, which gave way to kinetic impactors. Captain, Torres called out. We're getting reports from the boarding teams. They're inside the bioships. On screen 3, Chun could see helmet camera footage from Sergeant Vasquez's team. The Marines were fighting their way through what looked like the inside of a living nightmare. Organic defenders tried to stop them. Creatures they were part. Machine, part flesh, all horror. But human weapons and human determination were winning. There. Vasquez's voice came over the comm. Found one of the brain clusters. Chun watched as the sergeant's team entered a chamber filled with pulsing neural tissue. The walls were covered with what looked like a cross between computer circuits and nerve endings. This was the creature's mind, the part that controlled its weapons and movement. Light it up, Vasquez ordered. Plasma fire filled the chamber, burning. Through organic computers that had been grown rather than built. The bioship's psychic scream echoed through space as part of its brain died. On the Defiant's tactical display, Chun watched the creature's movement become erratic, its weapons firing wildly. "One down," she said with satisfaction. "How many more boarding teams do we have in action?" 37 shuttles launched, Kumar replied. "Most have made successful breaches. The Vraxx don't seem to know how to fight enemies inside their own bodies." It was true. The bioships had been designed to fight other spacecraft, not to repel borders. Their internal defenses were minimal, mostly organic antibodies that were useless against armored humans. The Marines were rampaging through. The creature's vital organs like a virus, the Vraxx. Immune system could not fight, but the external battle was getting harder. The remaining bioships had adapted to most of human weaponry, their hulls changing to deflect railgun rounds and absorb plasma fire. Worse, they were learning to coordinate their attacks, using their hive mind to focus fire on the Defiants. "Weak points, Captain," Jackson said quietly. "We can't keep this up much longer. They're getting smarter." Chun knew he was right. The Vraxx were learning human tactics faster than humans could develop new ones. In a few more minutes, they would have adapted to everything the Defiant could throw at them. That was when the Zorathian ships joined the battle. Admiral Zethara's flagship approached the combat zone cautiously, followed by the handful of vessels that had survived the initial attack. The crystal ships were damaged, their hulls cracked, and their weapons barely functional. But they were still capable of fighting. "Captain Chun," Zethara's voice came over the comm. "Our sensors show that your boarding parties have disrupted several Vraxx bioships. If you can create an opening, we can strike at their weak points." Chun felt a surge of hope. "What do you need us to do?" "The Vraxx adapt to individual weapon types, but they have trouble with rapid changes in attack patterns. If you can force them to focus on multiple threats simultaneously ... double quotes, Chun understood immediately. A coordinated strike. We keep them busy while you hit them where it hurts. Precisely. But it will require perfect timing. Chun looked around her. Bridge at the faces of her crew. They were tired, bloodied, but not beaten. These were the men and women who had followed her into hell, trusting her to bring them out again. "All stations," she announced, "prepare for final assault. We're going to end this." The plan was simple in concept, devastating in execution. The Defiant would charge directly at the largest Vraxx bioship, forcing the entire enemy fleet to focus their fire on the human vessel. At the critical moment, the Zorathian ships would attack from a different angle, striking at the brain clusters that controlled the creature's adaptive systems. It was a suicide run. The Defiant could not possibly survive the concentrated fire of 40-plus bioships. But if the timing was perfect, if the Zorathians struck at exactly the right moment, they might be able to cripple the Vraxx fleet before the human ship was destroyed. "All power to forward shields," Shen ordered. "Take us straight at the big one." The Defiant accelerated toward the largest bioship, a creature 15 kilometers long and bristling with organic weapons. Every gun on the monster turned toward the approaching human vessel. Energy discharges that could crack planets focused on a single target, but the human ship did not die easily. Its shields flared and sparked under the assault, but held together through sheer brute force engineering. Railgun turrets continued firing, even as the ship's hull began to buckle. Fighter craft swarmed around the bioship like angry wasps, their weapons adding to the chaos, shields failing. Kumar shouted over the din of combat. "Hull breaches on multiple decks." "Hold together," Shun ordered, as much to her ship as to her crew. "Just a little longer." The Defiant was dying. Its armor was being stripped away, layer by layer, its weapons falling silent one by one. But it had done its job. Every Vraxx bioship in the system was focused on the human vessel, their adaptive systems working frantically to counter the strange. New threat. That was when the Zorathians struck. Admiral Zethara's ships came in from 3 directions at once, their crystal hulls gleaming in the light of weapons fire. Their guns were not as powerful as human weapons, but they were precisely targeted. Each shot struck at the exact locations where Sergeant Vasquez and her fellow Marines had damaged the bioships. Brains. The effect was devastating. Bioships that had been adapting to human attacks suddenly found their control systems destroyed. They thrashed wildly, their weapons firing at random. Some collided with each other, their massive hulls tearing great wounds in their neighbors. "It's working," Torres called out. "The Vraxx fleet is breaking apart." Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she watched the enemy formation dissolve into chaos. But the moment was brief. The Defiant was still dying, and the largest bioship was still very much alive and very angry. "Captain," Jackson said, his voice calm despite the destruction around them. "We've lost main power. Life support is failing. We need to abandon ship." Chun looked at the tactical display one more time. Most of the Vraxx fleet was crippled or destroyed. The surviving bioships were fleeing toward the edge of the system. The immediate threat to the Zorathian world was over, but the war was far from finished. "All hands," she announced over the ship's failing communication system. "Prepare to abandon ship. It has been an honor serving with you." As evacuation pods began to launch from the dying Dreadnought, Chun stayed on the bridge, watching the stars. Through a cracked viewport, somewhere out there, more Vraxx fleets were waiting in the dark between systems. This battle was won, but the real war was just beginning, and humanity would be ready for it. The rescue shuttle from Admiral Zithara's flagship found Captain Chun floating in her evacuation pod 3 hours after the Defiant died. The human Dreadnought had finally succumbed to its wounds, breaking apart in a shower of metal and plasma. That lit up the Kepler 442 system like a second sun. Chun felt the gentle hum of Zorathian technology as the crystal ship's tractor beam pulled her pod into its docking bay. She had expected to die with her ship, but her crew had overridden the pod's manual controls and ejected her by force. Command officers did not abandon their vessels, but sometimes their vessels abandoned them. The docking bay was unlike anything in human experience. The walls were grown rather than built, formed from living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The air smelled of flowers and ozone, clean and pure after the smoke and burning metal of the battle. Zorathian crew members moved with fluid grace, their translucent bodies catching and reflecting the ambient illumination. Admiral Zethara herself was waiting as Chun climbed out of the pod. The Zorathian leader was tall and elegant, her crystalline form a deep blue that shifted to purple in the light. Her face, while alien, showed expressions that Chun could recognize: relief, gratitude, and something that might have been wonder. "Captain." "Chun," Zethara said, her voice still carrying that musical quality despite the exhaustion in her tone. "I am in your debt. My people are in your debt." Chun looked around the docking bay, taking in the alien architecture and the strange beauty of Zorathian technology. "How many of your people made it out?" 640 million, Zethar replied. "The Vraxx consumed much of our world, but your sacrifice gave us time to evacuate the major population centers. Without your intervention, all would have been lost." The number was staggering. Chun had never been responsible for saving so many lives before. The mathematics of warfare usually dealt with smaller figures: ships destroyed, battles won, tactical objectives achieved. This was different. This was an entire civilization pulled back from the edge of extinction. "What about my crew?" Chun asked. "Most survived. Your escape pods were well designed, and we recovered them quickly. Some of your Marines are still aboard. The bioships they captured securing the vessels for study. They refuse to leave until the job is complete. Chun smiled despite her exhaustion. That sounded like her Marines. They would stay in hell itself if they thought they could learn something useful from the experience. "Admiral," she said, "we need to talk. The Vraxx aren't gone. This was just one fleet. There will be others." Zithara nodded, her crystalline features becoming somber. "Yes, our long-range sensors detect movement in the dark regions of space. The Vraxx are gathering, preparing for a larger assault. They will come again, and next time they will be ready for human tactics." She gestured toward the bay's exit, inviting Chun to follow. "But first, you must see what your sacrifice has accomplished." They walked through corridors that curved like the inside of a living shell, past chambers filled with rescued Zorathians, who stared at Chun with a mixture of fear and fascination. These beings had lived their entire lives in peace, never knowing violence beyond what they read in history books. The sight of a human warrior, still in her damaged uniform, was as alien to them as the Vraxx had been. The observation deck offered a view of the entire system. Kepler 442b hung in space like a wounded jewel, its surface scarred by Vraxx, feeding tentacles, but still beautiful. Debris from the battle drifted in slow orbits around the planet, pieces of bioships, fragments of crystal vessels, and the scattered remains of the Defiant. But it was not the destruction that caught Chun's attention. It was what was being built. Zorathian construction ships were already at work, growing new defensive platforms in orbit around their world. The structures were different from the elegant spires that had been destroyed. These were harder, more angular, designed for war rather than beauty. Human engineering principles were evident in their design. Redundant systems, heavy armor, weapons that could adapt to any threat. "You're militarizing," Chun observed. "We are learning," Zethara corrected. "For 3,000 years, we believed that peace was the natural state of the universe. We thought that beauty and knowledge would protect us from harm. The Vraxx taught you as otherwise." She pointed to one of the construction sites, where a massive railgun was being installed on a crystal framework. "Your people understand something that we forgot, that sometimes the only way to preserve peace is to be prepared for war." Chun watched the work proceeding below. It was strange to see Zorathian technology being used to build weapons, but she understood the necessity. The galaxy was not the peaceful place the crystal beings had believed it to be. There were predators in the dark, and prey needed teeth to survive. "There's something else," Zethara continued. "During the battle, our scientists analyzed the Vraxx. Bioships. What we found, it changes everything." She led Chun to a research facility that had been hastily set up on the flagship. The chamber was filled with pieces of Vraxx technology, chunks of living metal, fragments of organic computers, samples of the acid that served as their blood. Zorathian scientists worked over the samples with an intensity that Chun had never seen from the normally peaceful race. "Show her," Zithara instructed one of the researchers. The scientist, a thin Zorathian whose crystal form was pale green, activated a holographic display. The image showed the internal structure of a Vraxx bioship, with various systems highlighted in different colors. "The Vraxx are not a single species," the scientist explained. "They are a collective, a hive mind made up of dozens of conquered races. Look here." He pointed to a section of the display that showed neural tissue. "These patterns are familiar. We have seen them before, in the ruins of the Kethver civilization. And here, these organic circuits match technology found in Yelani space. The Vraxx are not just destroyers, they are collectors. They consume civilizations and add their knowledge to their own." Chun felt a chill run down her spine. "How many civilizations have they absorbed? We estimate at least 40, possibly more. Each conquest makes them stronger, smarter, more adaptable." They are the accumulated knowledge and resources of half the galaxy, all twisted toward a single purpose: consumption. The implications were staggering. The Vraxx were not just another alien threat. They were the accumulated nightmare of every species they had ever destroyed, a constantly growing cancer that consumed everything in its path. But there is hope, Zathara said. The battle showed us something important. The Vraxx can adapt to any single threat, but they have trouble with rapid changes in tactics. Your human doctrine of overwhelming firepower, combined with our precision targeting, was more effective than either approach alone. Chun began to understand what the Zorathian was suggesting. You want an alliance. More than that. We want to combine our civilizations, at least for military purposes. Zorathian technology guided by human tactical doctrine. Your weapons powered by our energy systems. Your marines protected by our shields. It was a revolutionary idea. Humans and Zorathians had always viewed each other with suspicion, if not outright hostility. The crystal beings saw humans as violent primitives, while humans saw Zorathians as weak pacifists. But the Vraxx threat changed everything. What about your people? Chun asked. Will they accept human military advisors? Human weapons on their worlds? Zathara's expression became grim. 640 million Zorathians are alive today because a human captain decided to answer our distress call. Because human marines were willing to board Vraxx bioships that no sane being would enter. Because a human crew sacrificed their ship to save a world they had never seen. She turned to face Chun directly. My people may have preferred peace, Captain, but they are not fools. They understand that sometimes peace must be fought for. Over the following days, as rescue operations continued and the extent of the damage was assessed, Chun watched two civilizations begin to merge their military capabilities. Human survivors worked alongside Zorathian engineers, sharing knowledge that had been kept separate for decades. The crystal beings learned about redundant armor and kinetic weapons, while humans discovered the secrets of energy manipulation and adaptive shielding. It was not always an easy process. The two species had very different approaches to problem solving. Humans favored brute force solutions and redundant backups, while Zorathians preferred elegant designs and efficient systems. But gradually, a new hybrid technology began to emerge. The first joint patrol ship was launched 2 weeks after the battle. It looked like nothing either species had built before. A crystal hull reinforced with human armor plating, powered by Zorathian energy cores, and armed with human weapons. It was beautiful and deadly, a perfect fusion of two philosophies of engineering. What do we call it? Chun asked as she and Zathara watched the ship's maiden voyage from the observation deck. Hope, the Zorathian replied. We call it Hope. Chun nodded, understanding. The ship represented more than just a new weapons platform. It was proof that different species could work together, that the galaxy's civilizations did not have to face the Vraxx threat alone. But even as she watched the new vessel take its place in the growing defense fleet, Chun knew that the real test was still to come. The Vraxx. The stars burned cold and distant in the void of space. Between them, something moved that made even the darkness seem afraid. The Valkyrie war fleet drifted through the galaxy like a disease, leaving nothing but death behind them but war. Prince Zathara stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another world die. The planet below had once been green and blue, covered with cities and forests. Now it was gray ash and glowing craters. His bioships had fed well today. The living vessels pulsed with satisfaction, their organic hulls rippling as they digested. The remains of another civilization. Status report, Zathara commanded. His voice was deep and harsh, like grinding metal. The feeding is complete, War Prince, replied his second in command. The bioships have consumed all useful organic matter. Population eliminated. No survivors detected. Zekthar nodded. It was always the same. Every world, every species, every civilization they encountered ended the same way. Some tried to fight. Some tried to hide. Some begged for mercy. None of it mattered. The Velkari were perfect killing machines, and they had been killing for 1,000 years. The War Prince was 12 feet tall, his body a mix of flesh and metal that had been shaped by centuries of bioengineering. His skin was black chitin, harder than steel. His eyes glowed red in the darkness of the bridge. Tubes and wires connected his brain directly to the ship's living nervous system. He could feel everything the massive creature felt, its hunger, its satisfaction, its endless need to consume and grow. "Show me the star charts," he ordered. A hologram appeared in the air before him. It showed the galaxy spread out like a spiral of light. Large sections were marked in red, territories conquered by the Velkari Empire. The red had been growing. For 1,000 years, swallowing star system after star system, Zekthar studied the map with cold satisfaction. They had destroyed the Zephyrans first. Those crystal beings had been masters of energy, able to turn starlight into weapons. It had taken the Velkari 50 years to crack their defenses and shatter their crystal cities. The screaming had been beautiful dot. Then came the collective of 1,000 worlds. A hive mind that controlled billions of bodies across hundreds of planets. They had perfect coordination and technology that seemed like magic. But the Velkari had learned to corrupt their shared consciousness, turning their greatest strength into weakness. The collective had torn itself apart from within. The ethereals had been the most challenging. Ancient beings of pure thought who had given up physical bodies millions of years ago. They existed as living energy, traveling between dimensions. But the Velkari had found a way to trap them, to force them back into flesh so they could be properly killed. Their death screams had echoed across space itself. Now the galaxy belonged to the Velkari. 3 spiral arms were under their control. Countless species had been wiped from existence. Entire civilizations had been reduced to nutrients for the bioships. "War Prince," called the navigator. "We are approaching the edge of the next spiral. Arm. Our scouts report primitive life forms ahead." Zekthar moved to the viewing screen. The new star system appeared before them, a small, yellow sun with several planets orbiting around it. One of the planets was blue and white, clearly supporting life. "Analysis," he demanded. "The inhabitants call themselves humans," the scout reported. "Bipedal mammals, average height 6 feet. They have barely achieved interstellar travel. Their technology is primitive. Chemical rockets, nuclear fission, basic energy weapons. They are currently engaged in warfare among themselves." Zekthar laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "How refreshing. A species that kills itself. We may not even need to do much work. They have a population of approximately 8 billion on their home world," the scout continued. "Several small colonies on nearby planets and moons. Total population across their territory is less than 10 billion. "Pathetic," Zekthar said. "The Zephyrans had 1 trillion citizens. The collective numbered in the hundreds of billions. These humans are barely worth noticing." But something nagged at him as he stared at the star charts. This sector of space looked familiar somehow. His bioneural implants searched through the vast databases stored in his modified brain. Ancient records, fragments of data from civilizations. Destroyed long ago. There. Deep in the archives. Warning markers in dead languages. Symbols that roughly translated to dangerous words. The quiet ones. Speakers in the dark. Those who listen. The markers surrounded this entire spiral arm. "Navigator," Zekthar called. "What do our historical records say about this region of space?" The navigator's eyes went blank as he accessed the data cores. Very little, War Prince. This sector was largely ignored by previous galactic civilizations. Most records simply mark it as unexplored or uninteresting. There are some warning markers, but they appear to be superstitious nonsense from extinct species. Zekthar frowned. The Velkari had learned not to ignore warnings left by dead civilizations. Usually, those warnings existed for good reasons. But what could be dangerous about such primitive creatures? "Show me more details about these humans," he ordered. The hologram shifted, displaying images captured by their long-range scouts. The humans looked soft and weak. No natural armor, no claws or fangs, no obvious weapons built into their bodies. They seemed to rely entirely on tools and technology for survival. But as Zekthar watched, he noticed something strange. In every image, the humans were in groups. They were talking to each other, working together, sharing resources. Even in their wars, they showed concern for their wounded enemies. They had concepts that the Velkari had abandoned long ago. Mercy, compassion, cooperation. Fascinating, he murmured. They fight each other, but they also care for each other. How contradictory. "Shall we begin the assault, War Prince?" asked his weapons master. "Our bioships are hungry again." The last feeding was barely enough to satisfy them. Zekthar considered. Something about this situation felt wrong, but he could not identify what. The humans were clearly no threat. Their weapons were laughable compared to Velkari biotechnology. Their numbers were tiny. Their civilization was young and fragmented dot, and yet those ancient warnings continued to bother him. "We will proceed as planned," he decided. "But carefully. Send advance scouts to gather more intelligence. I want to understand these creatures before we consume them." The bioships began moving toward the human system, their living hulls rippling with anticipation. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, bred specifically for warfare and feeding. Their weapons were living organisms that could adapt to any defense. Their armor was self-healing biological material stronger than any metal dot as they traveled through space. Zekthar found himself thinking about the long history of Velkari conquest. For 1,000 years, they had been the apex predators of the galaxy. Nothing could stand against them. Nothing could even slow them down. But sometimes, in the quiet moments between battles, he wondered what it had all been for. They had destroyed countless wonders, eliminated millions of unique species, erased entire cultures from existence. What did they have to show for it besides empty space and dead worlds? He pushed such thoughts away. The Velkari were warriors. Conquest was their purpose. Destruction was their art. They had no need for the soft concepts that made other species weak. The human system grew larger on their screens. Soon, they would make contact. Soon, another world would feed their bioships. Soon, another species would join the endless list of the extinct. But as they approached, those ancient warnings seemed to whisper in the darkness of space. Be careful. These are not what they seem. These are the quiet ones. These are the speakers in the dark. Zekthar ignored the whispers. After all, what could such primitive creatures possibly do to the mighty Velkari Empire? He would soon discover that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are not the ones who scream the loudest, but the ones who speak the softest. Sometimes the greatest weapons are not built from metal and energy, but from understanding and compassion. The Velkari were about to learn that there are forces in the universe more powerful than fear, and they were racing straight toward them at faster than light speed. The Velkari bioships dropped out of hyperspace like falling nightmares. Their massive forms blotted out the stars, casting shadows across the human colonies on the outer planets. Each vessel pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that served as threat displays, warnings that had made countless species surrender without a fight. War Prince. Zekthar expected the usual response. Panic transmissions filled with screaming. Desperate attempts to contact distant allies. Pathetic offers of tribute and surrender. He had heard them all before, in thousands of different languages, from hundreds of different species. They all sounded the same in the end, the sound of prey realizing it was about to die. Instead, silence filled the communication channels. Zekthar frowned, his red eyes scanning the displays on his bridge. Communications officer, why are we receiving no transmissions from the humans? Unknown, War Prince. Our sensors detect active communication networks throughout their system. They are clearly aware of our presence, but they are not transmitting. To us, perhaps they are paralyzed with terror, suggested the weapons master. Some species simply freeze when faced with superior predators. But even as he spoke, the sensors showed human ships moving throughout their system, not fleeing in panic, but continuing their normal activities. Supply runs between colonies, scientific expeditions, even what appeared to be recreational travel. They are ignoring us, Zekthar realized. The concept was so alien that he had trouble processing it. They see our fleet, and they are ignoring us. Then finally, a transmission came through. The signal was clear and strong, broadcast on multiple frequencies, so there could be no mistake. But the content was not what any Velkari had ever heard before. Greetings, visitors. Welcome to our solar system. We have been monitoring your approach and are honored by your presence. Could you please identify yourselves and state your intentions? We would very much like to establish communications. The voice was calm and friendly, like someone greeting neighbors at a social gathering. There was no fear, no desperation, no recognition that death had just arrived in their system. Just polite curiosity and what sounded almost like ... enthusiasm. Zekthar stared at the communication console as if it had become a dangerous animal. In 1,000 years of conquest, no species had ever welcomed the Velkari. Most had not even managed to remain calm enough to speak coherently. Is this some kind of trick? He asked his intelligence officer. Unknown, War Prince. Our scans show no hidden weapons, no trap formations, no signs of advanced military preparation. Their defensive capabilities appear exactly as primitive as our initial report suggested. Zekthar activated the communication system. When he spoke, his voice carried the full authority and menace of the Velkari Empire. I am War Prince Zekthar of the Velkari Empire. We have come to claim this system. You will surrender immediately and prepare for consumption, or you will be destroyed. You have one standard time unit to comply. It was the same ultimatum he had delivered to countless worlds. Usually, it was followed by desperate pleas for mercy, offers of anything the species possessed, sometimes complete civilizational breakdown as governments collapsed in panic. The human response came quickly. The same calm, friendly voice as before. Thank you for the introduction, War Prince Zekthar. We understand your position, and we appreciate you giving us time to respond. However, before we make any decisions, we would very much like to open a dialogue with you. Would you be willing to send a representative for a face-to-face discussion? We promise safe passage, and what we believe will be a very interesting conversation. Zekthar felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Confusion. They want to ... doc? It appears so, War Prince, his communications officer confirmed. They understand that we are here to destroy them. The message was quite clear on that point. And they want to have a conversation? Yes, War Prince. Across the bridge, Velkari officers exchanged glances. This was completely outside their experience. Species either fought or surrendered. They did not invite their conquerors to chat, but what disturbed Zekthar most was not the strange request itself. It was the effect it was having on his bio-neural systems. The organic implants that connected him to the ship's consciousness were sending warning signals throughout his body. Every evolved instinct was screaming that something was wrong, that they were in danger. But danger from what? These humans had weapons that could barely damage Valkyrie armor. Their ships were primitive metal constructs that moved slower than Valkyrie biovessels. Their numbers were insignificant. War Prince, his tactical officer reported. The humans are transmitting coordinates for a meeting location. It appears to be a space station orbiting their moon. Zekthar studied the tactical display. The station was small and simple, constructed from basic metals and ceramics. It had no weapons that their sensors could detect. It posed no threat to even a single Valkyrie warrior, much less their entire fleet. They want us to come to them. He mused. It could be a trap, suggested his security chief. What trap could such primitives possibly set that we could not escape? Zekthar replied. But even as he said it, those ancient warnings from the database echoed in his mind. The quiet ones. Speakers in the dark thought another transmission arrived. This time, the signal included visual data. A human face appeared on the communication screen. Small, soft features, with pale skin and dark hair. The creature looked impossibly fragile compared to the armored bulk of a Valkyrie warrior. War Prince Zekthar, my name is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm a xenobiologist, someone who studies alien life forms. I realize this situation is unusual, but we genuinely would like to learn about you and your people. We've prepared refreshments and comfortable accommodations. Would you consider joining us? The human Dr. Chun smiled as she spoke. Zekthar had seen smiles before, usually right before species tried to deceive or manipulate his forces. But this smile was different. It seemed genuine, warm, and completely unafraid. You study alien life? Zekthar found himself asking. It's my life's work, Dr. Chun replied. I've been fascinated by the possibility of meeting other intelligent species since I was a child. When our sensors detected your fleet, I have to admit, I was more excited than afraid. The opportunity to learn about your biology, your culture, your history, it's beyond anything I could have imagined. Zekthar felt his bio-neural systems sending increasingly urgent warning signals. This was wrong. This was all wrong. Prey species did not get excited about meeting their predators. They did not invite them for refreshments and comfortable conversation. You realize we are here to kill you, he said bluntly. I understand that's what you've told us, Dr. Chun replied. But I'm hoping that once we get to know each other, you might reconsider. After all, you must have traveled a very long way to get here. Surely you have time for a brief conversation before making any final decisions? The simplicity of the statement was somehow more unsettling than any weapon could have been. She was treating the annihilation of her species as a decision. That might be changed through polite discussion. War Prince, his second-in-command, whispered, this feels like a trap. But Zekthar found himself curious despite every instinct screaming warnings. In 1,000 years of conquest, no species had ever reacted this way. No one had ever been excited to meet the Valkyrie. No one had ever offered refreshments to their own destroyers. Very well, he decided. I will send a diplomatic drone to your station. But understand, this changes nothing. We are still here to claim your system. Of course, Dr. Chun replied cheerfully. We understand your position completely. We just hope you'll keep an open mind during our conversation. I think you'll find it illuminating. As the communication ended, Zekthar found himself staring at the blank screen. Something about the word illuminating had sent a chill through his enhanced nervous system. But why? It was just a word. Just a promise of interesting conversation. He ordered a diplomatic drone prepared, a semi-autonomous bioconstruct that could speak with his voice and report back everything it experienced. As the drone launched toward the human station, Zekthar settled back to observe whatever trap these strange creatures had prepared. But deep in his genetic memory, ancient warnings continued to echo. The quiet ones did not scream when death came for them. They did not run or hide or beg. They spoke softly and listened carefully, and somehow that was more dangerous than any weapon ever forged. The Velkari were about to discover why entire galactic civilizations had marked this region of space with symbols of warning. They were about to learn that sometimes the most terrifying predators are not the ones with the biggest teeth, but the ones who invite you to sit down and tell them all about yourself. The drone approached the human station, and with it, the first crack appeared in an empire that had seemed unbreakable for 1,000 years. The diplomatic drone docked with the human station through an airlock that had been hastily modified to accommodate its biomechanical form. As it moved through the corridors, the drone's sensors recorded everything: the simple metal construction, the basic lighting systems, the complete absence of visible weapons or defenses. What it found instead was something far more unsettling: normalcy. The humans had prepared a meeting room with comfortable chairs, soft lighting, and a table covered with various foods and drinks. Dr. Sarah Chun was waiting, along with another human who introduced himself as Ambassador David Park. They both stood and smiled when the drone entered, as if welcoming an old friend rather than a representative of their future destroyers. "Welcome aboard," Dr. Chun said warmly. "Please, make yourself comfortable. Can we offer you anything? We weren't sure what your dietary requirements might be, so we prepared a variety of options." The drone, speaking with War Prince Zekthar's voice, replied with suspicion. "We do not require your food. State your terms for surrender." "Oh, we're not here to discuss surrender," Ambassador Park said pleasantly. "We're here to get to know you. Dr. Chun has been absolutely fascinated by your bioships. The integration of organic and mechanical systems is remarkable. How did your people develop such advanced bioengineering?" War Prince Zekthar, watching through the drone's sensors from his flagship, felt a moment of complete disorientation. They were asking about Velkari technology with genuine scientific curiosity, not trying to find weaknesses or steal secrets, but simply wanting to understand how it worked. "Our bioengineering is a weapon of war," he replied through the drone. "It exists to make us more efficient killers." "Yes, but before that," Dr. Chun said, leaning forward with interest, "your people must have had incredible biological knowledge to begin with. The complexity of merging living tissue with mechanical components, the neural interface systems, the self-repair capabilities. This represents millions of years of scientific development. What was your civilization like when you first began these experiments?" The question hit Zekthar like a physical blow. No one had asked about Velkari history in centuries. No one had ever cared what they were before they became conquerors. The ancient memories stirred in his bioneural implants, images of a different time, when Velkari science had been focused on healing rather than harming, on growth rather than destruction. "We were ... double quotes," he began, then stopped. Why was he answering? Why did these creatures' curiosity compel him to respond? "Take your time," Ambassador Park said gently. "We're in no hurry. Would you like to sit down? Dr. Chun and I were just discussing how remarkable it is that your people managed to create living starships. The engineering challenges alone must have been incredible." The drone found itself settling into one of the offered chairs. The action was automatic, guided by social instincts that the Velkari had not used for warfare in so long that Zekthar had forgotten they existed. "Our ancestors were healers," he heard himself saying. "Bioengineering was originally developed to cure diseases, to extend life, to help damaged organisms repair themselves." "That makes perfect sense," Dr. Chun said, making notes on a small tablet. You'd need that foundation of biological knowledge before you could develop more advanced applications. What changed? How did healing technology become military technology? Again, that gentle curiosity that seemed to pull answers from deep inside him. Zekthar tried to focus on his purpose. He was here to gather intelligence before the conquest. But instead, he found himself remembering. There was a war, he said slowly. Our planet was attacked by a species called the Devourers. They consumed everything, plants, animals, even the soil itself. Our healing technology wasn't enough to save the dying, so we adapted it. We made our bodies stronger, harder, more resistant to damage. We turned our medical bioships into weapons that could fight back. You were defending your home, Ambassador Park said with understanding. That must have been terrifying. How long did the war last? 300 years. Zekthar replied. By the end, we had become something our ancestors would not have recognized. But we had survived. We had won. And then? Dr. Chun asked. The question hung in the air. Zekthar realized he had never thought about it that way before. What had happened after they won? Why had they continued to change, to become more aggressive, more militaristic? The galaxy was dangerous, he said finally. Other species saw our strength and feared us. They formed alliances against us. We had to strike first, or they would have destroyed us. A cycle of fear, Ambassador Park mused. You were afraid they would attack, so you attacked them first. But then their neighbors became afraid of you, so you had to attack them too. And it just kept spreading. The words cut through Zekthar like a blade. No one had ever described the Velkari expansion that way before. They had always spoken of it as conquest, as destiny, as the natural order of strong species ruling over weak ones. Not as fear driving more fear in an endless spiral. We are not afraid, he said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. Of course you are, Dr. Chun said gently. You'd have to be. You've been fighting for 1,000 years. You've made enemies of everyone you've ever met. You can never stop, never rest, never trust anyone, because the moment you do, all those civilizations you've wronged will come for revenge. That must be exhausting. The observation struck home with devastating accuracy. Zekthar realized that he could not remember the last time he had truly relaxed, truly felt safe. Even on his own flagship, surrounded by the most advanced biotechnology. In the galaxy, he was always watching for threats, always prepared for battle. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Don't we? Ambassador Park asked. We've studied your expansion patterns, your military doctrine, your behavior patterns. You never settle on conquered worlds. You never build lasting colonies. You consume what you need and move on. You're not empire builders. You're refugees. You're running from something, but you've been running so long you've forgotten what you're running from. The words hit like physical blows. Zekthar felt his bioneural systems flooding with stress chemicals as suppressed memories began to surface. Images of the Velkari homeworld as it had been before the war. Green spaces and healing centers. Scientists working to cure diseases instead of create them. Warriors who protected rather than conquered. Stop, he said through the drone. I'm sorry, Dr. Chun said immediately. I didn't mean to upset you. Would you like to take a break? We could talk about something else. The kindness in her voice almost broke something inside him. When had anyone last shown concern for his emotional state? When had anyone cared if he was upset? Why are you doing this? He asked. Doing what? Ambassador Park replied. Being kind to us. Showing interest in our history. Treating us like people instead of monsters. Because you are people, Dr. Chun said simply. You're people who have done terrible things, but you're still people. Everyone has a story. Everyone has reasons for the choices they've made. We want to understand your story. Our story is written in the blood of billions, Zekthar said bitterly. Yes, Ambassador Park acknowledged. And that's a terrible thing. But it's not the only thing. Before the blood, there were healers and scientists and artists. There were people who created instead of destroyed. Those people are still inside you, aren't they? Zekthar tried to deny it, but the words wouldn't come. Deep in his genetic memory, in the oldest parts of his bioneural implants, he could feel them, the scientists who had first learned to merge flesh and metal, the healers who had saved countless lives, the artists who had created beauty in living form. What do you want from us? He asked finally. Nothing, Dr. Chun said. We just want to know you, to understand you, to see if maybe, after all these years of running and fighting and being afraid, you might be ready to stop. We cannot stop, Zekthar protested. The galaxy would never forgive us for what we have done. The galaxy doesn't have to forgive you. Ambassador Park said, but you might learn to forgive yourselves. And you might find that there are other options besides conquest and consumption. For the first time in centuries, War Prince Zekthar felt something he had thought was lost forever. Hope. Not hope for victory or dominance, but hope for something different. Something better. On his flagship, alarms began to sound as his emotional state-triggered responses in the ship's bioneural network. Other Velkari warriors were detecting the change in his chemical signatures, his brain patterns, his very essence dot, and across the fleet, something unprecedented began to happen. Velkari, who had not felt anything but aggression and hunger for generations, suddenly experienced a new emotion, curiosity about what their War Prince was learning in that simple human station. The conversation continued, and with each word, each question, each moment of genuine interest and concern, cracks appeared in the foundation of an empire built on fear and violence. The humans were doing something no weapon had ever accomplished. They were making the Velkari remember who they used to be. The conversation stretched on for days. What had begun as a simple intelligence-gathering mission became something neither species had expected, a genuine exchange of ideas, experiences, and understanding. War Prince Zekthar found himself returning to the human station repeatedly, no longer sending drones but coming in person. Each time, more humans joined the discussions. Historians who wanted to understand Velkari culture, anthropologists fascinated by their social structures, artists curious about their aesthetic preferences. None of them seemed afraid. None of them treated him as the monster he knew himself to be. They simply treated him as a person worth knowing. Dr. Chun had become particularly interested in Velkari biology. She asked detailed questions about their reproductive cycles, their genetic modification techniques, their methods of bioship breeding. But she asked with the same enthusiasm she might show for any scientific discovery, not as someone trying to find weaknesses to exploit. The neural interface technology is remarkable, she said during one session, studying scans that Zekthar had voluntarily provided. You've essentially created a perfect symbiosis between organic consciousness and mechanical systems. The applications for medical treatment alone could revolutionize healthcare across the galaxy. We use it to control weapons, Zekthar reminded her. Yes, but imagine if you used it to control healing systems instead, she replied. Ships designed to repair damaged ecosystems instead of destroying them. Neural interfaces that could help paralyzed individuals walk again. The same technology, but applied to creation rather than destruction. The idea sent strange ripples through Zekthar's consciousness. He had never considered using Velkari technology for healing in centuries. The concepts felt foreign, almost forgotten, like words in a language he had once known but lost. Ambassador Park had taken a different approach. He asked about Velkari philosophy, their concept of honor, their understanding of purpose and meaning. These were questions that cut even deeper than the scientific ones. "You've conquered most of the galaxy," Park observed during one late-night discussion. "You've achieved what most species would consider impossible. But what comes next? What happens when there's nothing left to conquer?" Zekthar had never considered the question seriously before. The Velkhari Empire had always been focused on the next target, the next conquest, the next feeding. The idea of completion, of achieving their goals, and then having to decide what to do afterward, was almost incomprehensible. "We will rule," he said, but the words felt empty. "Rule what?" Park asked gently. "Empty space and dead worlds? You don't build cities or create art or raise families on the worlds you conquer. You consume them and move on. What kind of empire is that?" "A strong one," Zekthar replied automatically. "But is it a happy one?" Park asked. "When was the last time you felt joy, Zekthar? Not satisfaction from victory, not pleasure from conquest, but simple happiness? When did you last laugh, or create something beautiful, or share a moment of connection with another being?" The questions hit like targeted weapons. Zekthar realized he could not remember feeling joy. He could barely remember what the emotion felt like. His biomodifications had enhanced his capacity for aggression, focus, and tactical thinking. But somewhere along the way, they had suppressed his ability to experience positive emotions. Velkhari had begun requesting permission to join the discussions. At first, Zekthar had refused. This was a command decision, not a social gathering. But as the conversations continued, he found himself curious about what his warriors would think, how they would respond to these strange humans who treated everyone with such inexplicable kindness. The first to join was Sub-Commander Velthara, his chief science officer. She had been modified for enhanced analytical thinking, her emotions suppressed even more than most Velkhari. But when Dr. Chun began discussing the theoretical applications of biotechnology for environmental restoration, something awakened in Velthara's ancient genetic memory. "I remember," she said suddenly, interrupting Dr. Chun's explanation of terraforming techniques. "Before the war, before the modifications, I worked on ecosystem rehabilitation. We had gardens on the homeworld, living art that could adapt and grow and change with the seasons." "You were an artist," Dr. Chun said with delight. "A biological artist. Could you show us some of your work?" Velthara's hands moved without conscious direction, her fingers tracing patterns in the air. As she gestured, bioluminescent organisms began to emerge from her biosuit, tiny, glowing creatures that responded to her neural commands. They formed shapes and patterns, swirling geometries of light that pulsed with their own alien beauty. The humans watched in fascination, asking questions about the organisms, their biology, their relationship with their creator. No one had paid attention to Velthara's artistic abilities in centuries. Most Velkhari had forgotten she possessed them. More warriors began joining the sessions. Combat specialists found themselves discussing philosophy with human historians. Bioship pilots shared stories of the beauty they had seen in deep space with human astronomers. Engineers talked about the theoretical possibilities of using their technology for construction rather than destruction. Each conversation revealed another layer of Velkhari society that had been buried under centuries of militaristic conditioning. They had poetry, dark, complex verse that spoke of loneliness and the void between stars. They had music, harmonic frequencies that resonated through bioship hulls, creating hauntingly beautiful compositions. They had concepts of family, friendship, and love, though these had been twisted and suppressed by their modifications. The humans listened to everything with genuine interest and respect. They did not judge or condemn, even when the Velkhari described the worst of their atrocities. They simply sought to understand how a species of healers and artists had become destroyers, and whether that transformation might be reversible. The interesting thing, Dr. Chon observed during one session, is that you've preserved all of it. The art, the music, the science, the philosophy. It's all still there in your genetic memory, your cultural databases, your personal experiences. You've buried it, but you haven't destroyed it. Why would we preserve what made us weak? Asked Weapons Master Krizan, one of the most militaristic of the Valkyrie present. Because it didn't make you weak, Ambassador Park replied. It made you complete. The ability to create as well as destroy, to love as well as fight, to hope, as well as fear. These aren't weaknesses. They're what make life worth living. Krizan's bioneural implants flickered with conflicting signals. His modifications screamed that emotions were weakness, that attachment was vulnerability, that creation was a waste of resources better spent on weapons. But deep beneath the technological conditioning, older instincts stirred. I had a mate. Once, he said suddenly, before the final modifications. She created living sculptures that could grow and change over time. I thought her work was beautiful. What happened to her? Dr. Chun asked gently. The war consumed her. Not killed, consumed. She volunteered for bioweapon integration to help fight the Devourers. By the time the modifications were complete, she could no longer create, only destroy. She became one of our most effective weapons, and I never saw her art again. The pain in his voice was audible even through the mechanical distortions of his bio-enhanced vocal cords. Around the room, other Valkyrie began sharing similar stories. Artists who became weapons, scientists who forgot their love of discovery, healers who learned only to harm. It doesn't have to stay that way, Dr. Chun said quietly. Biotechnology can be reversed, modified, redirected. If you wanted to, you could probably restore some of what was lost and make ourselves vulnerable. To attack? Krizan asked. From whom? Ambassador Park replied. You've conquered most of the galaxy. The species that might attack you are either dead or too afraid to try. The only enemies you have left are the ones you create by continuing to conquer and consume. War Prince Zekthar felt something crack inside his chest, some barrier that had held back emotions for centuries. He realized that they were not discussing military strategy or technological applications. They were talking about hope, about the possibility of being something other than weapons of destruction. Even if we wanted to change, he said slowly, the galaxy would never trust us. We have destroyed too much, killed too many. There can be no forgiveness for what we have done. Maybe not, Dr. Chon agreed, but there could be redemption. There could be a future where you use your incredible abilities to heal instead of harm, to create instead of destroy. You can't bring back the dead, but you could prevent more deaths. You can't restore the extinct species, but you could protect the ones that remain. The idea was so alien to Valkyrie, thinking that it took several moments for Zekthar to process. They had spent so long thinking of themselves as destroyers that the concept of becoming protectors seemed impossible. But as he looked around the room at his warriors, seeing wonder in their eyes for the first time in centuries, hearing them discuss art and beauty and love, he began to believe that perhaps impossible things might be possible after all. 3 weeks had passed since the first contact, and War Prince Zekthar stood in a place he had never expected to visit, the memorial chamber aboard the human station. The walls were covered with images and names, billions of them representing every species and civilization that had fallen to the Valkyrie Empire over the past 1,000 years. Dr. Chun stood beside him, not speaking, simply allowing him to absorb the magnitude of what he was seeing. Each face represented lives cut short, dreams unfulfilled, entire cultures reduced to nothing more than data points in Velkari military reports. "We kept records," he said quietly, "but not like this. We recorded military statistics, resource, acquisition, strategic value. We never recorded their names, their faces, their stories. Everyone deserves to be remembered," Dr. Chun replied, "even if only by strangers who never knew them." Zekthar reached out with one massive hand to touch a section of the wall displaying children from a world his forces had consumed decades ago. They had been playing in a park when the bioships arrived. He remembered because the scene had been so peaceful, so innocent, that it had briefly confused his targeting systems. "I ordered their deaths," he said, "all of them. I gave the command and watched their world burn." "I know," Dr. Chun said simply. "How can you stand to be in the same room with me? How can any of you?" She was quiet for a long moment, considering her words carefully. "Because I've gotten to know you over these past weeks. I've seen who you really are underneath all the modifications and conditioning. You're not a monster, Zekthar. You're a person who was shaped by circumstances into doing monstrous things." "There's a difference, is there?" he asked. "The dead don't care about my circumstances." "No, they don't," she agreed, "but the living might. The species that are still out there, still afraid, still hiding from you, they might care if you chose to become something different. Through the viewing ports, Zekthar could see his bioships hanging in space like sleeping leviathans. But something had changed in them over the past weeks. The aggressive displays had faded. The hunger signals that usually drove them to seek new prey had quieted. Even the ships themselves seemed to be responding to the emotional transformation of their crews. "My warriors are changing," he said. "Yes, they are," Dr. Chun confirmed. "Some of them, anyway. Not all." That was true. About a third of the fleet remained loyal to the old ways, led by war-cast hardliners who viewed the ongoing discussions as weakness and contamination. They had begun transmitting demands that Zekthar end the talks and begin the conquest as planned. "General Mordak believes I have been compromised by human psychological warfare," Zekthar said. "He may be right. Do you feel compromised?" Dr. Chun asked. Zekthar considered the question seriously. By Velkari standards, he had been compromised. His aggression levels had dropped significantly. His hunger for conquest had been replaced by something he could barely name, a desire to understand, to connect, to find meaning beyond destruction. "Yes," he said finally, "but I think I prefer being compromised to being what I was before." Behind them, the memorial chamber doors opened and Ambassador Park entered, followed by several other humans and a group of Velkari warriors. The mixed group had become common over the past week as more species numbers began participating in the ongoing discussions. "Zekthar," Park said, "we've been working on something we'd like you to see, a proposal for what comes next." They moved to a conference room where holographic displays showed detailed plans and projections. The humans had been working with progressive Velkari scientists and engineers to develop alternatives to the traditional conquest model. "The basic idea," explained Dr. Martinez, the human project coordinator, "is to use Velkari biotechnology for restoration instead of destruction. Your ships could be modified to clean up environmental damage, restore dead ecosystems, even bring life back to worlds that have been too damaged to support it naturally." The displays showed bioships transforming barren planets into garden worlds, their living hulls processing toxins and generating breathable atmospheres. Instead of consuming worlds, they would heal them. "The technical challenges are significant," admitted Sub-Commander Valthara, "but not insurmountable. Many of our biosystems could be repurposed for environmental repair with relatively minor modifications. And the psychological benefits," added Dr. Chun, "could be enormous." Instead of creating fear wherever you go, you could create hope. Instead of leaving empty space behind you, you could leave thriving worlds. Zekthar studied the projections with growing fascination. The concept was so radically different from everything the Valkyrie had done for the past millennium that it was almost inconceivable. But as he watched the simulations of dead worlds returning to life, he felt something stir in his chest. Something that might have been joy. What about the Resistance faction? He asked. General Nordak and his followers will never accept this. That's something we need to address, Ambassador Park agreed. We can't force change on anyone, but we can offer alternatives to those who want them. Over the following days, the proposal was refined and expanded. Human scientists worked alongside reformed Valkyrie to develop detailed plans for bioship modifications, ecosystem restoration techniques, and psychological rehabilitation programs for warriors who wanted to abandon their military conditioning. The response from the fleet was mixed but encouraging. Nearly half of the Valkyrie expressed interest in the restoration project. Many had grown tired of endless warfare and were eager to try something different. Others were simply curious about the technical challenges involved, but the Resistance faction grew increasingly hostile. General Mordak began broadcasting messages throughout the fleet, denouncing Zekthar as a traitor and calling for his removal from command. Some bioships began showing signs of internal conflict as their crews split between old and new philosophies. The crisis came to a head when Mordak's faction attempted to seize control of the fleet and begin the conquest of the human system by force. The battle that followed was unlike anything in Valkyrie history. Not an attack on an external enemy, but a civil war between those who chose change and those who clung to the old ways. It was brief but decisive. The bioships that had been modified for restoration work proved surprisingly effective in defensive roles, and the crews that had embraced change fought with a determination born of hope rather than fear. Mordak's faction was defeated, their bioships disabled or captured. It's over, Zekthar announced to the assembled humans and Valkyrie in the station's main conference room. Those who wish to continue the old ways of conquest have been removed from positions of authority. The rest of us are free to choose a different path. And what path will you choose? Dr. Chun asked. Zekthar looked around the room at faces that had become familiar over the past month. Humans who had shown him kindness when he deserved none. Valkyrie who had rediscovered parts of themselves they thought were lost forever. We will try to heal what we have broken, he said. We will use our technology to restore instead of destroy. We will attempt to become worthy of the patience and understanding you have shown us. It won't be easy, Ambassador Park warned. The galaxy will not trust you quickly. There will be species that refuse to work with you, worlds that will flee at your approach, civilizations that will always see you as monsters no matter what you do. I know, Zekthar replied, but we have to try. We have spent 1,000 years being the darkness between stars. Perhaps it is time to learn how to be light instead. The transformation began immediately. Bioships throughout the fleet underwent massive modifications, their weapon systems converting into environmental processors, their hunger drives redirected toward restoration goals. Valkyrie warriors submitted to psychological rehabilitation, working to undo centuries of conditioning that had made them perfect killers but incomplete people. The first restoration project was a world the Valkyrie had devastated only 50 years earlier. The planet had been reduced to ash and poison, its atmosphere toxic, its surface lifeless. But the modified bioships worked for months to process the toxins, to seed new life, to slowly nurse the world back to health. When the first green shoots broke through the healing soil, many Valkyrie wept for the first time in centuries. Word of the transformation spread throughout the galaxy. Some species remained skeptical, convinced it was an elaborate deception. Others were cautiously hopeful. A few brave civilizations even reached out, offering to work with the reformed Valkyrie on restoration projects. Years passed. The work was slow and difficult, and not every project succeeded. Some Valkyrie struggled with their new roles, finding it harder to create than to destroy. Some worlds were too damaged to save. Some species would never forgive or trust, no matter what the Valkyrie did to atone that. But gradually, things changed. Dead worlds bloomed with new life. Damaged ecosystems were restored. The galaxy began to see the Valkyrie not as harbingers of destruction, but as symbols of the possibility of redemption. Dr. Chun, now in her 70s, stood with War Prince Zekthar on the observation deck of his flagship as they watched a restored world spinning peacefully below them. Where, once there, had been only ash, now there were forests and oceans teeming with life.